we're going to look at their board, and we're going to try to evaluate every position from QB to secondary to determine team needs. Quarterback, they got Tyrod Taylor, and they've got Peterman, who they drafted last year. So I'm completely ignoring the thought of them getting a quarterback because I don't think they're going to go 7-9 with their schedule. So I'm removing that from my vocabulary. Now, running back's interesting because LaShawn McCoy turns 30 in the offseason, and he had 2 good games against Tampa Bay and Oakland after the bye week, but he struggled versus the Jets. And he's one of those players that could be on the chopping block, but at the same time, the Bills do need a running back behind him that can complement him better. And I feel like running back could be a need to a degree. What do you think?
Yeah, I can see it being running back, but I mean, honestly, I think that's every team's need when it comes down to any kind of game management is having a strong running back.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. So I'm going to add running back to the team needs. And, yep, we got that up. Next up, we've got wide receiver. I do have that as a team need. I'm not going to remove that, even though they did trade for Kelvin Benjamin. It's a 1-year prove-it deal. I don't think it's the biggest need at the moment, though, so I'm going to reorganize this by, like, needs. And I'm going to put D-line as the biggest need. Then I'm probably going to put corner, then safety. But I'll go one by one here as I adjust the board. Because I think wide receiver is a need to an extent. Because wide receiver, depending on what happens, that could be a big need or a little need. It depends on what the Buffalo Bills do with Kelvin Benjamin in the offseason. Because if their receivers besides Benjamin don't step up, that becomes a need. Nope, you think?
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to come up with wide receivers to step up.
Yes, the next position is a tight end position. They do have one of the better tight ends in Charles Clay, but his numbers weren't great last year. But he was a number 2 tight end in Miami. Buffalo stole him from the Dolphins. I know if Thomas were here, he'd talk about how underrated Charles Clay is. Charles Clay was ruled out Thursday night for the Jets game. And this year, Charles Clay has 20 receptions, 258 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. So and he was ruled out for multiple weeks after the left knee surgery on October 9th. And I don't think his numbers were very good last year either. I don't have tight end as a need, but the other tight end that's filling in for Clay hasn't really stepped up. So I sort of feel like we have to list this as a need now, because I did mock O.J. Howard to the Bills because I heard rumors that they really liked him last year. So I feel like with Clay not producing, only 20 receptions, and tight end's a position they might be able to upgrade. Not sure if they'll address all these needs head on, but it might be a position they want to look at upgrading. Any thoughts on that, or do you think they're good at tight end?
I mean, honestly, I don't see any tight ends that would be, except for maybe Fumagalli and the other guy.
Brenneman and Fumagalli are the only future starters in this draft at tight end. And you look at what you look at the body of work Charles Clay has. He had 69 receptions in 2013 in Ryan Tannehill's second year, which was his best year. He had 58 receptions in 2014, and he's had 51 and 57 receptions when healthy in 2015 and 2016. He's only played 5 games this year, but he had 20 receptions in those games. So I don't think it's a case of Charles Clay struggling. I think it's a case of him having a down year. And he's still averaging nearly 13 yards per reception. So that's very good for a tight end.
Yeah, it's definitely still really good for a tight end.
So we'll pass on them replacing Charles Clay at this point.
All right.
I was asking you what you think we should do. So we should pass.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say that. We'll pass on, yeah.
All right, because that's a reliable target. It's a short-term target, but it's a reliable target. Next up, we have offensive tackle. Now, Cordy Glenn, I love Cordy Glenn at left tackle, but he missed the first 5 games of the year. He's healthy now. I think that's a big reason why the Bills have had success. But you can argue very easily after last night's game, the Bills need offensive line upgrades because they have great starters. They just don't have any depth when guys go down. And this is what I mean. They've got a great left guard in Richie Incognito, a great center in Eric Wood, who had a season-ending injury in 2016. I didn't think he'd come back and be healthy. He's healthy now. So I don't think center's necessarily a need. But then you've got the right tackle position where Dion Dawkins has played. They moved Dawkins over to left tackle, and he struggled there. But I honestly think Dion Dawkins is more suited for a guard role. So you could draft an offensive tackle and kick Dawkins inside to guard, and then put that player at left tackle if Glenn gets injured, and put Dawkins at right tackle. I feel like Buffalo needs a swing tackle, but they don't necessarily need a starting offensive tackle. Would you agree with that to an extent?
Yeah, I would say to an extent. I think you should have a tackle that you want for the long term. So I feel like they should really start their scouting department and say, hey, go ahead and start making ourselves like a depth chart. You know what I mean?
I mean, we both loved Cordy Glenn coming out of Georgia, but the thing is, he hasn't played a 16-game season since 2015, and Dion Dawkins might be better at guard than offensive tackle. That's why I listed that as a need. I listed guard as a need because Richie Incognito is a free agent, plus I figure they need to upgrade right guard. So Buffalo might need multiple guards. And then you look at the center position, yeah, that might be a liability because you look at what they have. They have Eric Wood. He's played every game. He only missed a season-ending injury in 2016. Other than that, he's played every game in his career, but he's 31 years old, despite being a 29 first-round pick. And Buffalo gave him a 2-year extension. So, wow, Eric Wood's actually under contract until 2020. Never mind. They're keeping him. We'll remove that as a need. Maybe we'll replace that with edge rusher because Jerry Hughes is a great pass rusher, but the other edge rusher that they drafted in the first round, Shaq Lawson, has dealt with injuries the first 2 years in Buffalo. So we should probably replace center with edge rusher for Buffalo.
Yeah, you know, I'll agree to a point, but I also feel like we should get Tyrod protection.
They need protection on offensive tackle and guard, but from a business standpoint, if they've already extended Eric Wood, their 31-year-old center, until 2020, they're probably not going to draft a center. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not something they need to upgrade down the road. I'm just saying they're probably not going to address that in this year's draft. Would you agree to that to a point? All right. That's good. So that's what we'll do. Defensive line is definitely the biggest need for Buffalo now because Kyle Williams is a free agent after the year, and they already traded their other defensive tackle, Marcel Darius. So I think defensive line at the defensive tackle position is probably their biggest need now. It was their biggest strength heading into the year. Now it's their biggest weakness. And the reason I'd say that is because McCown had all day to throw the football in the pocket. I don't know if Shaq Lawson's still dealing with injuries, but Jerry Hughes wasn't able to get pressure on McCown. And when he was, McCown was still able to make some nice throws and avoid turnovers. So that tells me Buffalo's not very good at pass rushing. And Buffalo loses 2 linebackers to free agency. Their right outside linebacker, who is a free agent after the year, and their middle linebacker, Preston Brown. So Buffalo might need multiple linebackers. We both agree on that. And then you get to the secondary. I feel like they overpaid the safeties they signed in free agency, but both are locked up until 2021. So we could remove that and replace that with another position potentially. Maybe we put center there, but I just feel like they can do better than the current safeties they have. That's my issue with that, Ryan. And then you look at cornerback, which they have Tre'Davious White, who's a future star, but they need another good corner next to him. So I'd say the linebacker, safety, and corner are those remaining needs, and that we're set with Buffalo's needs: D-line, cornerback, safety, offensive tackle, edge, guard, running back, and linebacker for Buffalo. Would you agree with that?
For the most part.
All right.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's move on to the Miami Dolphins now. They're the next team on this list. I listed QB as a need because I don't trust Cutler or Matt Moore. Cutler's been solid, Moore has been brutal, and you can cut Ryan Tannehill and save $15 million, which is why I think that's on the table. not saying they'll go that route, but it's certainly a possibility that might be considered. You have running back as a need. I didn't put wide receiver as a need yet, but I will put that as a need if Jarvis Landry leads the team. And even if he does, you got guys like Leonte Carew. You've got guys like that guy out of Texas Tech they drafted last year. Miami has weapons at the wide receiver position. I think that's one of their bigger strengths and one of the bigger reasons why they're in ball games. I listed tight end as a need because Julius Thomas, we were talking about the Dolphins game in London on the show, and they were struggling in that department. So, yeah, I think that's a big need for Buffalo. And then, I mean, Miami, my apologies. But, yeah, Ryan, I'm looking at Miami. They need quarterback play. They need running back play. They need a better tight end. Running back's not a primary need, but if Williams and Drake don't step up down the stretch, it's going to be a need. And then you're looking at potentially then you're looking at guard play and center play as other needs. I think center play is only a need because Mike Pouncey's never able to stay healthy, and that's the big issue with him, Ryan. I mean, offensive tackle's not really a big need for the Dolphins, but I was concerned that Laramie Tunsil and Juwan James would struggle at offensive tackle at the beginning of the year. But they've both been spectacular in that regard. And they've got depth. They've got Henderson. They've got Jordan Mills. They've got good depth behind those guys. So I'm going to remove offensive tackle as a need, but I'm trying to figure out what their other need might be. Maybe linebacker, because I thought linebacker would be a strength, but Raquan McMillan got injured. Lawrence Timmons regressed. I feel like overall we covered most of Miami's needs. They need a center. Tankersley starting at corner, so we won't list that as a need. They need another safety, though, and if Timmons is regressing and McMillan doesn't come back from an injury, linebacker will become a need down the road. So I feel like most of the needs for Miami are things we've covered. Any additions? All right, we'll move.
Honestly, I mean, Miami just really needs to get a quarterback that can stay healthy and build the line.
I mean, the guard play is the big weakness. Their offensive tackles are solid, but the rest of this is a work in progress. So I'm looking at it from that standpoint here, and we'll move on to the next team here, which is the New York Jets. I do have quarterback listed as a need because McCown's a free agent, but the more I watch McCown play this year, the more I think he's going to get an extension. And they're going to let Petty and Hackenberg develop for another year because McCown is completing 70% of his passes right now to the point where he's playing turnover-free football, very consistent, and he is saving Todd Bowles' job for another year. I do think they need upgrades on offense at receiver, upgrades at offense with I did have tight end listed as a need, but Austin Seferian-Jenkins is playing well. They could use another tight end to complement him, but he's playing well. And they got that guy from Clemson, not Hunter Renfrow, but the other tight end out of Clemson in the NFL draft, Jordan Leggett, I think it was, behind him. So we can remove tight end as a need. I think guard is a good position they're set at. They need a better center. They need multiple offensive tackles. One more edge rusher wouldn't hurt. The D-line's the bread and butter of this Jets defense. The inside linebackers are great, even though Demario Davis is getting up there. So with the Jets, it's really tough to say what their needs are as a team right now. But I think they have less needs than we're realizing. I mean, I really do believe that tight end is no longer a need for this team. I'm deleting that as a team need. Quarterback, I'll leave that up. Running back, I'll leave. Oh, I deleted the Dolphins team need as a tight end. Oh, well. But, yeah, I really believe the Jets have less needs than people realize. That's what I'm saying. They're set in more positions than we realize. I'm not saying they don't need to rebuild, because they do, but I'm saying they're more set than most people realize. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like they're more set than what most people realize, but they still got to rebuild.
They still need to rebuild on the offensive side of the ball, but they're much better defensively than I initially thought.
I think what it is that they need to find their offensive identity and their defensive identity as far as, are they going to be a smash-mouth football team, or are they going to be electric exciting, or, hey, steady in that one big play?
Yeah, I deleted tight end and linebacker as needs for the Jets in the draft, and the Jets have gone from 18 needs to 6. Miami currently has 8 different team needs. Buffalo has 9 different team needs. So the Jets have the fewest needs in this division, which is crazy. Next up, the New England Patriots. I listed QB as a need, but with Hoyer getting a 3-year deal, I don't think they're going to go with a QB until day 3. And they're going to wait for someone like Falk or Browning to slide in the draft. And then if they're there on day 3, that's when they're going to pull the trigger and take a quarterback. Because when you give Brian Hoyer, who's a career backup, a 3-year extension, and Brady's also got a 3-year extension, that's a pretty clear indicator that these are the guys Belichick's rolling with. But I still think they need someone that's going to push Hoyer for that backup job. So it's a minor need, but it's still a need nonetheless. Then you've got the running back position. Dion Lewis is set to be a free agent. They could use another running back, but it's not a huge priority. Wide receiver, I would say that's a big priority only because Julian Edelman, this team has not been the same at receiver without Edelman. Sure, Brandon Cooks will have a big game now and then and step up. Hogan's a very reliable asset. They have a great slot receiver in Amendola, but Malcolm Mitchell suffered a season-ending injury. Philip Dorsett is just terrible, and there's just no depth behind those receivers without Edelman. So I do think that's one of the bigger needs for this Patriots squad. Offensive tackle, I didn't list that as a need because they got guys like Antonio Garcia and Connor McDermott, who we loved on tape in the 2017 draft. So I don't think they go after an offensive tackle. I think they keep developing those guys and see where it leads to. I listed guard as a need, but I'm not sure if that's even a major need or a minor need at this point. I'm going to look up their contract because I'm a little bit stumbled on that, but I think for the most part, the Patriots are pretty set with where they are as a team and where their identity is on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, really, their only concern is who's going to take over when the GOAT retires.
Yeah, it's like who's going to take over when Brady retires, what players are going to step up offensively. They gave David Andrews, the center, a big contract. And I did list center as one of the needs for the Patriots, but with him getting that big extension, I don't think center's a big need for the Patriots anymore. So I'm deleting that as a need. This tight end is a need only because I wasn't sure if they'd have enough depth, and the Patriots just always seem to have a thing for tight ends. So I listed that as a need for that reason. But you look at what the Patriots have done, I think most of their needs are on the defensive side of the ball. I should probably, you know what? I'm going to replace the guard position with edge because I didn't list any edge players, and a lot of their edge players got depleted with injuries. I know they drafted Derek Rivers, who could be great down the road, but I'm going to list edge as one of the needs because I think that's probably their biggest need after receiver and cornerback. Getting that pass rusher to complement Rivers, getting another corner, and getting a receiver. I think those are the 3 primary needs. And then the Patriots can get the best linebacker on the board, the best running back on the board, the best quarterback on the board, or the best tight end on the board in day 3. Basically,
yep, I agree.
Basically, you get corners, receivers, and a pass rusher on day 1 and day 2, and then you just take the best player on the board because this Patriots team really only has 3 major needs, but they could add depth at certain positions on day 3. So after looking at the AFC East, I think the biggest thing that surprised me is that the Jets had the fewest draft needs of any of the teams. I don't know if we have to add, like Fanspeak wants us to have 7 different team needs by position. I don't know if they want us to add another position because we only have 6 for the Jets. So I'm just trying to think of what other positions we could add for the Jets because I think the minimum requirement is 7 for each. I think the minimum requirement is 7 positions for each team. Maybe it's 5. I forget what the minimum requirement is. I'll scroll down for a few teams and see what we got. Because with Pittsburgh, we only had like 7. I'm just looking through this to see what we had to make sure everything is working. Like the Chiefs, we only have 6 team needs. So I think the minimum requirement is 5 actually. So we'll leave the Jets at 6. But I think the most shocking thing, Ryan, is that the Jets actually had fewer team needs than the Patriots. when assembling the
Fewer
sport.
team needs than the Patriots?
Yeah,
That is a little bit of a shock.
because the Jets only had 6 different needs by positions, by depth, by youth, whereas the Patriots had 7. That's the most shocking thing in my opinion. And the only reason I listed tight end as a need is because they've got Gronk, they've got Dwayne Allen, but the Patriots always reload at tight end. They usually get a running back for depth. I mean, we could list running back as a team need for the Jets, but I think they're happy with what Powell and Forte are doing for that backfield. So it's really tough for me to say D-line's a need for the Jets because their 34 defensive line is great as it is. They need one more corner. They need some weapons. They need to build their offensive identity, and they need multiple offensive tackles. But overall, I like the state of where this Jets team is at with their tight ends, their running backs, their guards, their QB play with McCown. They do need a backup or a successor to McCown. But overall, I like what most of the things they have defensively in place. So that's why I think the Jets have fewer needs than the Patriots, but they need multiple offensive tackles. And you can't list offensive tackle twice on the fan speak board. That's why I think the Jets have like 7 needs, only 6 positional needs compared to the Patriots, Ryan. I think that plays a factor into it as well. Because the Jets need multiple offensive tackles, but you can only list offensive tackle once for team needs on fan speak. So that's why the Jets have 6 and the Patriots have 7. But in reality, the Jets have 4 or 5 offensive needs and 1 or 2 defensive needs. Don't you agree with that?
I feel like the Jets have a lot of defensive needs. It's just a matter of plugging them in for the right type of coaching. You know what I'm saying?
Well, they drafted Leonard Williams. They got Muhammad Wilkerson. They got Coney Ealy. Their defensive line is a strength. They've got 2 great linebackers in Demario Davis and Deron Lee, who they drafted in the first round. I think they could use one more pass rusher off the edge. I'll agree with you on that. They could use another corner, but those safeties they drafted in last year's draft, May and Adams, those guys have a future with this team. And Morris Claiborne's great too. So that's why I feel like the Jets have fewer needs on the defensive side of the ball than most people realize, Ryan.
But didn't they trade Sheldon Richardson though?
Yeah, but they replaced him with Coney Ealy, who the Patriots cut. And they drafted Leonard Williams and Hankerson in the first round. So I don't think that's a huge need for the Jets, like people are making it out to be.
I kind of feel like it's in between. I feel like it could be a need for them just to have that depth just in case somebody gets hurt because of the depth, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, we could list it as a need to make it seem like if you want me to list it as a need so that the Jets and Patriots each have 7 needs, I will. That's a fair compromise. And if you want me to do that, I'll do that right now before we proceed to the AFC North teams.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it.
All right. We'll do that right now. I'm actually going to put wide receiver ahead of edge and D-line and just adjust that briefly. Yeah, because edge and D-line are probably the least important of those needs, edge and D-line depth, because the corner, getting that cornerback, getting the offensive tackles, the center, the quarterback, building that offensive foundation is what you're looking at. Maybe multiple receivers, but you can only list a receiver once on FanSpeak. That's the thing. The Jets might need multiple receivers, Ryan. That's the thing I'm looking at. I wish I could, but I can't. Let's move on to the AFC North division. We might have to split this up into like different sections or divisions, but we'll move on to the Ravens team needs. I had quarterback listed as a team need because I feel like they need a successor to Joe Flacco. And I feel like he's overpaid. I don't think they're going to draft a quarterback because of his contract, because they lose money if they release him. But I also feel like they need to have that quarterback of the future. Maybe somebody like Browning or Falk on day 3 if they fall to that point, Riley Ferguson. I feel like they need that player. Now, running back is definitely one of the bigger needs for the Ravens. I mean, that's a huge team need for them because they need that guy. Woodhead and Kenneth Dixon have been huge liabilities in the backfield, so that's definitely something they need to upgrade. Their receivers, I feel like they could use an upgrade at receiver. I feel like the tight ends they have with Dennis Pitta and their other tight ends suffering season-ending injuries, that's really limited what the offense can do. I listed offensive tackle as a need, but Austin Howard and Ronnie Stanley have played well. The guards have played well. Center is probably, I'm going to replace offensive tackle with center. And then my only defensive need for the Ravens is another inside linebacker next to Mosley. I think the rest of the defense is pretty set as it is. And the Ravens just need to focus more on reloading on offense, getting the successor to Flacco and getting Flacco more weapons. Because a big reason why the Ravens have struggled offensively is due to the fact that Flacco doesn't have the weapons. I mean, Marshall Yanda and his other guard are dealing with injuries. I could list guard as a need at it. What do you think? Okay, Ryan, are you still on the call? I'll message Ryan. Okay, Ryan's back. All right, but like I was saying, I think that most of the Ravens' needs are on the offensive side of the ball. What do you think of that assessment?
I feel like you said the Ravens.
Yeah, the Ravens, because I feel like they need to get Flacco some weapons and maybe get reloaded guard. I can list guard as a need with both of their starting guards on injured reserve. I don't have that as a need, but I can add that right now.
You know, I feel like offense is definitely on the Ravens list just because obviously Steve Smith retired. You have Mike Wallace getting hurt, I feel like they need to get, like you said, Lazard would be a good fit.
Yeah, they could get Lazard in round 2, but if they get Lazard, they miss out on a good linebacker to complement Mosley. They also need a center. There's so many needs, and this is such a deep receiver draft. They might be able to get a receiver on day 3 if they have faith in the current weapons, but at the same time, it's a risky operation. It depends on who falls to them at that point, because Lazard would be great for them. I love what Christian Kirk can do, but it depends on who's the top receiver on their board, because that's what they're going to look at.
And that's why I like Lazard, though, is I feel like his height would help Joe Flacco because then he would have a bigger target because I feel like Mike Wallace is more of like a slot.
Yeah, Wallace is a slot. Most of their receivers are slot guys. They do need a bigger target. Is a better prospect than Sutton, in my opinion, which is why Lazard on my team between those two. And I like his route running. I like the fact that he can go out there. He can run every type of route just like Kirk. Out in my SWAT reports, I mentioned how Auden Tate's raw, but the upside with him is huge. And I mentioned in my SWAT report how Lazard can run every route like Kirk, but because he's having bad games on tape versus NFL corners, teams are going to downplay him and say he's not that good. And he could end up falling to round 3 or 4, depending on where teams have him, depending on his Senior Bowl week in Mobile, because teams look at that a lot. Like, if you're a senior and you're playing in the Senior Bowl, the scouts don't care about what you did on tape during the regular season until they want to see what you do in Mobile, and then they'll weigh that along with your regular season production. So if you have a bad game against a quality corner, quality opponent, they're going to take that into account. Now, with the Browns, Joey said it yesterday. We're going to replace guard as a need with quarterback. We also don't have cornerback listed as a need, and I'm going to go ahead and replace linebacker with cornerback because Joe Hayden's gone, and that's basically what I'm going to do. I've got QB, running back, wide receiver, center, because I agree with you that Treader's not their best option. They need multiple corners, multiple receivers, a running back. 4 rounds on the Evolution Network yesterday. We'll move on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati, like Belichick would say. Quarterback is a need because McCarron's a free agent after the year, but they can wait until the late rounds if they don't release Andy Dalton. Running back, they're set at wide receiver. I think running back and receiver for the Bengals are probably their 2 strongest positions in terms of stability and depth. tight end is definitely a need because Tyler Eifert can't stay healthy. I feel like Croft is a good number 2 tight end, but people are talking about how much promise he has. And they also drafted that tight end out of Buffalo, Mason Schreck, who I really liked. So we can remove tight end as a need, but I feel like if Brenneman or Fumagalli is there in round 3, the Bengals absolutely have to pull the trigger, Ryan. Like if one of those tight ends isn't there, they can move on and address another need. But if one of those tight ends is there, they absolutely have to pull the trigger.
I agree.
Offensive line, I've listed every offensive line position as an upgrade. Dalton needs protection. I listed edge rusher as a need, but Carl Lawson and Willis, the guys you were high on, are both playing well as pass rushers. So, and they still have Carlos Dunlap, so I'm going to remove that as a big need for the Bengals. They could use one more linebacker, one more safety. But yeah, overall, the big focus for the Bengals should be the offensive line. They could get a tight end for depth. They could get a quarterback to groom behind Dalton. They could get another defensive lineman at defensive tackle to replace Domata Pico. But most of their team needs are going to be on the offensive line. And I think they have more team needs than the Browns overall. Yeah, I've got 6 team needs for the Ravens and Browns. I've got 8 team needs for the Bengals.
You know, I think that's about accurate because the Browns are kind of rebuilding everywhere, whereas the Bengals, they have a good couple of key pieces at the right spots.
Yeah. With the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have all 22 starters under contract coming back next year, which leads me to my next point. They don't need to draft for need. They just need to take the top player on their board. I had running back as a need, but with Bell and Connor, that's no longer a need. I think receiver depth could be a need because Martavis Bryant's having the attitude problems. Eli Rogers isn't producing like you want him to. And I feel like a slot receiver is something they could use even though it's not a huge priority. I think quarterback for the future and inside linebacker are probably the 2 big needs. But Vince Williams is playing well at inside linebacker. I didn't expect him to play this well at inside linebacker. I'd say the 3rd need, I guess, is offensive tackle, because they could use a swing tackle. But Villanueva and Gilbert are good, but Gilbert hasn't stayed healthy. He has a buyout option. And if somebody like Orlando Brown, who you love, falls to Pittsburgh, they absolutely have to take him because the value at that point is too great to ignore. So I'd say those are the 3 needs for Pittsburgh, the 3 big needs. And then after that, I honestly have no idea what direction the Steelers go in.
My guess is wide receiver.
Yeah,
Because
we'll
right
list
now-
linebacker, quarterback, offensive tackle, and receiver as 4 needs, but I can't figure out the final team need they need because they're stacked at edge rusher. They have a great interior offensive line. They've got running back depth. They've got cornerback depth. They've got safety depth. We can list a backup safety, I guess, as the final need, or a guard. I'll let you pick between those 2 needs, but I need to list at least 5 needs for the Steelers.
I would say safety then, just because I feel like they need to find somebody for that depth and to bring back that Troy Polamalu spirit.
All right, we'll go with the safety then. Or I can keep safety and guard both up, and it will look like we have 6 needs. It'll look more professional, even though guard's not really a huge need for them. If they lose Ramon Foster at free agency, it will be a need, but it's not a huge need right now. Houston Texans, I listed quarterback as a need at the beginning of the year because I thought Watson will bust. I'm deleting that right now before Brad Noble trolls me. Moving on, running back and receiver positions are strong at. CJ Fedorowicz has done well. They could use a second offensive tackle. They could use guard play. They have a good center. They need another safety, in my opinion. The cornerbacks, they could use another cornerback for depth, but they got Jeremy Lane from Seattle, and they drafted Treston Decoud for depth as well, the guy Thomas likes. So I'll delete corner as a need. I have edge rusher listed as a need. They could get another pass rusher for depth. They've got Zach Cunningham in the 2nd round to complement their leader on defense, Brian Cushing. They got Watkins in the draft. Overall, the Texans really did have a strong draft where they got a lot of excellent value picks, but the one area they ignored, which infuriated Texans fans, was the offensive line. And they don't pick until the 3rd round this year, but they have 3 picks in the 3rd round. So that's the thing.
Chris, hear me out. That's not necessarily
necessarily a bad thing, because that's usually when you want to start looking at like your guard centers is like the third to fifth.
Yeah, but there isn't. I mean, if somebody like Wyatt Teller or Will Hernandez falls to round 3, the Texans will pull the trigger on that. But then at that point, there aren't very good immediate starters at guard. It's not like last year's draft where it was loaded at guard. So the Texans might only get one starter in the draft, but they got to find another starter in free agency. So that's the thing with the Texans. And tight end's not really a need. They've got Griffin, who's a free agent after the year. Fedorowicz is on IR, but I listed it as a need. And then the other needs, which are actually a surprise, I listed kicker and punter as team needs for the Texans. Moving on to Jacksonville, though, I have a quarterback listed as a need. Blake Bortles is playing well right now. I'll keep that as a need, but it's not a primary need. Or I can replace it with wide receiver, which seems like a more convenient option with how good the Jaguars have been. Tight end's a need. They need a starting left guard. I'm going to keep right tackle. I'm going to keep, you know what? I'm actually going to remove offensive tackle and add quarterback because Cam Robinson's played really well at left tackle. They paid Parnell a lot of money. Quarterback's more of a secondary need at this point. You could use a nickel corner for depth. The linebacker position, if Puslesny leaves, you could get a linebacker, but their linebackers are playing fantastic, and they got Blair Brown, the guy you and Joey liked out of Ohio. So I'll delete linebacker as a need, and we'll just go from there and say the Jaguars really need to focus on getting more pieces to enhance the quality of Blake Bortles in that offense. Because the defense is set, Ryan. We pretty much agree on that.
Yeah, I agree.
For the most part, the defense is set, but getting a few of those final offensive pieces to finalize the quality, because you have two great future slot guys in Rashad Green and Dede Westbrook who can come in and replace the free agents you have, but you need one more big target for Bortles that can do what Allen Robinson does. So the Jaguars and Texans ended up with 17 needs if you count kicker and punter. The Jaguars ended up with only 6. Steelers also had 6, but I wanted to give them 5. You need to give each team a minimum of 5 needs. So the Texans, Jaguars, and Steelers ended up with the fewest needs. Well, it's the Jets, the Steelers, and Jaguars. No, wait, we gave the Jets a D-line. So the Steelers and Jaguars have the fewest team needs so far. Next up, we've got the Colts. Here's what I've listed as team needs. I listed QB as a team need. I'm going to replace running. I'm not sure if I should or shouldn't replace running back because, no, I'm not going to do that. They've got good corners who are free agents. They got Hairston. They got Quincy Wilson. We'll replace that with offensive tackle because I feel like the center for depth behind Ryan Kelly with him missing time could be a need. Guard, they're losing Muhort to free agency. Tony Mario said in his power rankings that the Colts are just a mess everywhere right now. Like, Andrew Luck can't stay healthy. The running game's got 2 good running backs, but not a true number 1. If they cut Hilton, they save $9 million. Moncrief's a free agent. The offensive tackle situation with Costanzo giving up 6 sacks at left tackle, their left guard on IR, Ryan Kelly missing the beginning of the year. There's been no stability on the offensive side of the ball the entire year, and their 2 promising corners are free agents after the year. Malik Hooker's on IR. There's really no stability on this Colts team at all, and it's amazing that they haven't fired Pagano yet. That's what Tony said about the Colts. And the scary thing is, I kind of agree with Tony on this.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think
It depends on who they cut and who they keep. That's the big key variable, because if they keep some of the players like Hilton, Costanzo, those primary needs become secondary needs, like depth players in the later rounds. I think that's the big thing with the Colts. Do they keep Luck? Do they keep all these players? Because if they keep Luck, QB's not a need. But if they get rid of him, they're going to need competition for Brissett. So a lot of these needs with the Colts depend on what they do on the offensive side of the ball in the offseason. I would say I'll replace quarterback with tight end for now because Brissett's playing well. They've got Andrew Luck. And I feel like they need another tight end next to Jack Doyle, even though he's shown a lot of promise and has done better than Dwayne Allen, who the Colts traded to the Patriots. So that's sort of what I'm torn on. Do you think the quarterback or tight end situation? Go ahead and pick for that. We'll go on to the Titans after that.
I'm going to say quarterback, and that's because I continue to hear that the Broncos are going to aggressively pursue Andrew Luck.
All right, so this Colts team, as Tony said, it could be a really big mess on like a Browns 49ers type of level if they move on from these guys. And I wouldn't be surprised if they blew up the roster and completely rebuilt, because if you cut Hilton to save cap space, you cut Costanzo to save cap space, you have more cap space than any team, Andrew Luck's going to be pissed. And if Andrew Luck is pissed, he's going to want out of Indy like Jay Cutler when he was on Denver. So, and at that point, you'd have a new coach, you'd be rebuilding the team completely. So I'm not ruling out the possibility of a complete rebuild with the Colts, but I'm certainly not going to say the Colts are going to blow up their team and completely rebuild at this point. It's too early to jump to that conclusion, Ryan. That's sort of why we're both on the fence with this Colts team.
I agree.
Moving on, we have the Tennessee Titans. I could list safety depth because Malik Hooker got injured. I'll go ahead and do that. We'll pretty much add every position to the Colts. But the Titans, I'll add those while we talk about the Titans team needs here. I'd say with the Titans, they're set at receiver. They're set at running back. They could use one more guard for depth, one more center for depth, but they're not huge priorities. It's like with the Colts, they need a lot of help at a lot of different positions. With the Titans, they have a lot more flexibility. Kevin Byard, the safety I criticized, is playing well. Their cornerback, Adoree Jackson, who I know you are a huge fan of, he is playing well. So I think with the Titans, they have less needs than I originally anticipated. So that's a good thing for them, at least. So basically, I'm pretty much listing everything as a need for the Colts. I'm going into full panic mode with them. But with the Titans, their inside linebackers are both getting on pace to get 100 tackles again. Their tight end, their safety, Kevin Byard's actually playing well. So I don't think safety's a need. They could use another nickel corner for depth next to Adoree Jackson and the other corner they brought in, Logan Ryan. I still feel like both of them are number 2 corners, and they could use a true number 1 corner. So I will keep that up as a need, but I'm going to get rid of safety because Byard picked off the Browns. Tight end, Delaney Walker's missed some time with injuries, so I actually am going to keep that up. Defensive line, I feel like the Titans could use a few more defensive line players for depth. I feel like a guard for depth is in order as well. And the Titans are just one of these teams that they might take an edge rusher early because Arakpo and Morgan enter contract years next season in 2018. They might take an edge player early and sit him for a year. I feel like that's something they might do. But the Titans are the only team among the teams we previewed so far to have 5 team needs. And I feel like they're the one team in the AFC of the 12 we previewed so far that really has the luxury to go with the best player on their board outside of Pittsburgh. Because they're a young team.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, moving on. I did add edge player as a need only because they might get youth at that position. But I think the Titans overall are in pretty good shape. Next up, we have the Denver Broncos. QB is a need here. I listed running back as a need at the beginning of the year, but I'm going to X that out because they have great running backs. I didn't list receiver as a need. What I should have done is replace running back with receiver. That is what I should have done. I'm smacking myself on the head for not doing that or thinking about it.
I agree, because without Sanders right now, the Broncos would struggle terribly.
So I'm going to list OT as the secondary need. I'm going to list linebacker as the third need. I still think tight end is a need to an extent, but I want to get this right. So wide receiver, need number 4. Edge depth in case Shane Ray is injured. DeMarcus Walker hasn't impressed so far, but I think that could be a need. They are losing some corners to free agency, but overall they have some pretty good players at those positions. Justin Simmons has filled in at safety. So overall, I think this Broncos team has maybe 3 or 4 big needs. I'm going to replace guard with D-line. But overall, this Broncos team has like 3 or 4 big needs. and then the rest of their team needs. They've got like 4 or 5 big team needs, and then the rest they can draft for depth. Wouldn't you agree? They got like 4 or 5 big needs: QB, offensive tackle, inside linebacker, defensive line, and wide receiver. And then the rest of the draft, they can just take the top player on the board for depth.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, moving on to Kansas City now. I felt like the big issue with Kansas City was their play. They needed a guy next to Tyreek Hill, and a player like Sutton or Lazard would be perfect for them. They need a defensive lineman that can do what Dontari Poe does. A guy who could replace Ramik Wilson at inside linebacker is something they could get. I listed kicker as a team need, and the irony is they cut Cairo Santos, who was in a contract year. So I'm keeping that as a team need. Fullback, I'd love to see the Chiefs add a fullback for value purposes, and then cornerback. So those are the big needs I went after. They could go after a safety for depth too, Ryan, and when you think about the Eric Berry injury. But they gave Riley Sorensen a 4-year extension. They got Ron Parker under contract. I don't think they'll go that route. But the irony here is the Chiefs have 6 needs, and most of those needs are at positions like fullback and kicker, which is ironic because those are the least important positions in football. So overall, the Chiefs are in a pretty good state. Even though you hate to admit that because you're a Broncos fan.
I am. It really does rip me to admit that.
All right, moving on to the Chargers. I've got QB listed as a need. I had tight end listed as a need because they might move on from Gates, but Hunter Henry has shown he can be the man. They really need a corner more than a tight end. I listed edge player as a need, but with Bosa and Ingram, that tandem is solid short term. I don't think that's really a main concern anymore. I think tight end would be more of a need, and they could get a Goddard or a Cam Sirigne or somebody to complement Hunter Henry in the later rounds. So I'm really looking at QB, safety, and cornerback as those 3 primary needs. And then after that point, you could get another guard because you got Dan Feeney and Forrest Lamp. You have some overall quality depth at the guard position, but at the same time, there are a few areas you could fix. Williams missing a few games. I figured, well, Keenan Allen has injury issues. Mike Williams was out to the beginning of the year. Do you think Phillip Rivers needs another weapon, yes or no?
No, I think they need to start trying to either shop Phillip Rivers to get more picks, or they need to get somebody in to develop underneath him. I don't think they need to start spending time on wide receiver yet.
Yeah, and they drafted a lot of guards last year. I listed that as a need because their guards kept going down, but I don't really think that's as much of a need as some people are making it out to be. Overall, their offensive line is pretty stable and pretty deep. They really don't need another receiver. I would say QB, safety, cornerback, and tight end are the big needs. We'll keep defensive tackle up as a need, but Melvin Gordon has showed he can carry the backfield this year. So, wow. The only team with 5 needs on our board so far, like 5 legitimate needs, is the Los Angeles Chargers. But they need multiple safeties, so they actually need 6 needs. But yeah, that's kind of shocking, Ryan, that the Chargers, of all the teams we projected, they're the only team that has those big needs. That's really shocking to me.
It really is.
I mean, they do have great pass rushers. They've got short-term offensive tackles. I could add that in if they cut Weathersby. But right now, they just need to fix their secondary and get a successor to Rivers. And then they can draft a tight end and a defensive tackle for depth later in the draft. I mean, overall, that's a pretty good position to be in. But it's not easy to fix all those holes. The Oakland Raiders, I listed QB as a need only because Carr was dealing with injuries earlier in the year. I feel like they need a linebacker more than anything else. Then I'd say offensive tackle with them releasing Howard. I feel like after that, though, they can take the best player on the board. I actually am going to list running back as a need because Marshawn Lynch, he's a liability at times, and I think that is something that really hurts the Raiders. I'm going to replace QB with edge as the 4th need, and then that second OT as QB with that 5th need. So, yeah, because I feel like the Raiders do need a good backup behind Carr when he's injured. I feel like that's a liability to a degree. And I think you can make the same case with the Titans, even though I didn't add a backup as one of their needs. I think that's something we could both make a case for. So I'm going to do that with the Titans. And we're finally done with the AFC teams. As far as hydration, I feel parched, but I'm going to move on. We're going to get through these NFC teams, and then we'll end the show, I promise. We won't spend as much time. The Cowboys, they're pretty much set at most positions. La'el Collins is playing better than I expected at offensive tackle, plus they extended him. So I don't think that's a need. They don't really – they could use another left guard next to Zach Martin, but it's not a huge priority. They could use a successor to Witten. Again, not a huge priority. They do need another outside linebacker. They do need another safety. They do need another defensive tackle. I would say they even need a second edge player next to Taco Charlton. I would say that's actually one of their bigger needs, if not their biggest need. But overall, the Cowboys are pretty set offensively for the next 2 to 3 years. They just need to get that defensive identity, get the pieces in place, because they drafted 3 corners. They do have some solid safeties in there down the road. But they got Awuzie, they got Jordan Lewis out of Michigan, and they got one more corner. So I would actually say that cornerback situation is pretty stable right now, even though they got some project rookies they're developing. I would say getting an edge player, a safety, and either a defensive lineman or a linebacker would probably be their bigger needs. One more. But overall, this is a very good team to be a part of. Cowboys have a lot of pieces in place. Let's move on to the Giants. Any thoughts on the Cowboys before we get to the Giants?
I think the Cowboys really need to focus just more on like linebackers, and then I think their pass rush is okay, and then they just need to work on the safety.
Yeah, safety could be a need for them. The Giants, I have offensive tackle listed as a need. Both their corners, Jenkins and Cromartie, both of their corners got suspended. I felt like they ignored cornerback depth in the draft last year, and that is really showing this year because I thought both of their corners would start all 16 games. Jenkins got injured week 2. Then they suspended him later in the year. They suspended Cromartie. So because they ignored cornerback in depth in the draft, they're paying for that. I mean, that's really one thing that's crippled the Giants this year. I feel like another safety for depth could be a need. Weston Richburg, their left guard's a free agent. Weston Richburg and Justin Pugh, their left guard and center, are both free agents. I feel like they need multiple linebackers. 2 of their outside linebackers are free agents. The defensive line is the strength of this Giants defense. Eli Manning, I didn't list a successor to Eli Manning because they drafted Davis Webb, but if someone of great value like a Josh Rosen is there, I don't think they're going to rule it out of the cards. Even somebody like Mason Rudolph would bring that stability. So I don't think quarterback's the route they're going to take early in the draft, but I'm not ruling that as a out-of-the-cards type situation. I mean, they could easily go in that route. What do you think, Brian?
I think the Giants just need to focus on probably receivers, because what is that when all your receivers go down?
They don't have any receiver depth, and that's an excellent point as well, because Marshall's out. I just completely overlooked that, and I feel foolish because it's like I'd have them taking a receiver in the 2nd round of my mock draft, and I didn't even have that on the board. So I'm looking at the Cowboys. They have 6 needs. The Giants have 8 different team needs. So the Giants are a mess because of that. I think a large part of that is due to injuries. I had running back as a need for Ajayi, but with all the depth they have, Ajayi for 2 more years, Blunt in a contract year, Wendell Smallwood, with all the depth they have at the backfield, that is no longer a team need for the Eagles. Receiver, they could use depth if Alshon Jeffrey walks. Defensive line, their defensive line is excellent. I don't even know why I listed that. I felt like they didn't get a player next to Fletcher Cox at defensive tackle. That's something they could do in the draft, but the thing is the Eagles only have 1 draft pick in the first 3 rounds. So they're either going to take a receiver or an offensive tackle with that first pick, and then they're going to focus on other needs later. Don't you agree? I mean, I feel like they're going to focus a lot on the guard play, the linebacker depth, the deep line depth later, and they're going to focus on the offense early in this draft because they traded a lot of picks away. They're deep at corner when healthy. They're deep at pass rusher. They're deep at quarterback. They have 2 offensive tackles in Peters and Johnson who are beasts when healthy. but Peters suffered a season-ending injury. Lane Johnson got suspended. So that swing tackle, somebody you can develop, that's sort of a big need for the Eagles. But I think if they lose Alshon Jeffrey, it's hard to say with the Eagles because even if they lose Jeffrey, they still got Juju. Or not Juju. Steelers got Juju. They still got Nelson Aguilar from USC. They still have Torrey Smith. They still have all different kinds of weapons. But I feel like the biggest target they have is Alshon. And if they lose him, they need to get another big guy. Even somebody like a Lazard would work wonders in Philly with Wentz. Any thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, that basically hits a nail on the head.
I mean, the Eagles have only 5 team needs now, and I feel like they're going to take a receiver, whether it's a Weineke or a Lazard, they're going to take someone. Washington Redskins, I did list QB as a need, but that's only a need if Cousins leaves. I'm actually going to list guard as the biggest need, wide receiver, and then safety. They are loaded at corner. They drafted a lot of corners like Fuller, Fabian Morrow to complement their 2 starters. I don't think they go that route as a team and as a business. Offensive tackle depth is needed because Trent Williams suffered injuries for 2 years in a row. He hasn't played a full 16-game season since 2014. Like the year they gave him that 5-year extension, the first year they gave him that 5-year extension, he's been dealing with injuries since. And you told me I need to give Washington a second offensive tackle. And I feel foolish for not listening to you initially because they had starters. They just didn't have depth at that position. And I overlooked that. And I look like a fool for overlooking that. So this is my way of saying I'm going to make it up. I'm going to take ownership here and give them an offensive tackle in the draft needs.
Oh, good.
Sometimes I'm wrong, but the thing is, if I'm wrong on something and you tell me I'm wrong on something, sometimes I'll take ownership if I see that same flaw.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Chicago Bears.
All right.
All right. Chicago Bears, I'm going to list edge as a need instead of quarterback. I do think they could do better than Trubisky, but the thing is they're going to take edge players and receivers early. That's the thing with the Bears. I mean, they should replace Trubisky, but they're not going to because they traded up to get him. It's a huge investment on their end. I think he's going to bust, but I'll list it as a backup need or a secondary need because I'll still list offensive tackle as a need because they could release Bobby Massey. That's a thing as well. So it's really tough to gauge this Bears team right now. Some of their linebackers are dealing with injuries as well. So it's really difficult to get a precise read. Their tight end, Zach Miller, who's in a contract year, dealing with some injuries. So they could use one more D lineman. I'm just trying to get this right because the Bears are just a mess right now at a lot of different positions. The running back position and their offensive line at guard and center are really the only bright spots.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, with the Bears, we've got 4, 8, 9 different needs. Lions, I listed backup QB as a need. I'm not going to do that. Stafford got his payday. I thought that would be a need if they released Stafford because I was looking at the contract. They extended him. I think linebacker, D-line, edge, safety, they extended Glover Quinn too, so safety's no longer a need. They're pretty deep at that position. I'm just looking at the Lions state as a franchise. They got a lot of depth at corner. They've got Golladay now at receiver. They really don't need a receiver. They could use a tight end to replace Ebron, and their kicker's actually, Matt Prater's actually been pretty good this year. So with the Lions, we have 5 needs for them, but they have needs on the front 7. They need multiple pass rushers. They need a second defensive tackle. They need a linebacker. They need one more running back. They need a tight end. This is a lot more of a complete team than most people realize, but they need to build that front 7. They need to get it back to where it was when they had Sue and Fairley. I think that's what's keeping the Lions from contending.
Yep, I agree.
Packers, we're moving on to Green Bay. Running backs, no longer a big need for the Packers because Aaron Jones has played well and they invest in all those running backs. Receiver, I think that's the direction they're going to go in with Cobbs and Cobb and Sim, Jordy Nelson and Cobb both being free agents. They don't really have that big guy like a Lazard. And Lisa wants the Packers to get Lazard in the draft. So, yes, you finally have a Lazard backer. So that makes you happy. The D line.
I would rather him not go to Green Bay, though.
You don't want the Packers to draft Lazard for that reason.
Maybe. Don't know that.
Maybe. D-line, I feel like another D-line could be huge. They do need some youth off the edge, but overall the Packers are in a pretty strong state as a franchise. I mean, they've rebuilt that secondary, so that's no longer a need. We'll add quarterback as a need because of Aaron Rodgers, the injuries he suffered this year, and Hundley's just been too unreliable. So I'll add quarterback as a team need for that reason. So the Packers have 6 different team needs, but they need to add youth at a lot of positions. Like, they have a very good starting lineup when healthy, but they need to add a lot of youth at a lot of different positions. That's the thing with the Packers.
I agree. I think the Packers, all the Packers really need to do is just stay consistent and stay healthy. Because if they can do that, they're usually a playoff team every year.
Yeah. I have guard,
Okay,
D-line. We're on to your second favorite team, the Vikings. I've listed guard, D-line, tight end, quarterback, kicker as the big needs. What other position besides those 5 do you think they need? Should we list receiver or corner as the final need? I'm going to let you make that decision. Or safety. Which of those 3 do you want to go in? Receiver, corner, safety, or even a third linebacker? Oh, they got that Ben Heaney guy, so they don't need linebacker help. But which position are you looking at? Receiver, corner, or safety, Ryan?
Now, real quick, speaking of owning up, do you remember how you said Ben Gideon would not start? And I said he is very worth it.
Yeah, you were right about that. You were right about Heaney. That's why I'm not listing linebacker as a need.
Well, here's
and they got Lamert too.
You got to remember that linebacker, like that's their bread and butter right there. That linebacking position, because they had who was it, Chad Henningway or whomever guarding that spot for quite some time. So I almost want to say that linebacker would be a good one. However, I think cornerback depth is going to be key because Xavier Rhodes has gotten hurt. I mean, I feel like cornerback.
I agree with that. We'll go cornerback, and I'm going to listen to your suggestions. Atlanta Falcons. Takaris McKinley's actually played well at the edge position, so I'm no longer going to list that as a need, right, as an immediate need. We'll list it as a secondary need, and we won't even list that as a need because they've got 2 first-round pass rushers. We'll get rid of this fullback thing here. We'll put tight. We listed kicker as a bigger need than guard. Yes, I deserve a haha emoji for screwing up that badly, Thomas. So yeah, we'll list tight end as the 4th need to depth behind Austin Hooper, and then we'll take this tight end thing on the bottom and we'll replace it with a kicker because teams don't value kickers. Even if there's a few NFL teams that need youth at kicker, teams don't value kickers. And as long as Matt Bryant is back, this team will be good. But the thing is, Matt Bryant is like 44 or 45 years old. At some point, he's going to retire or decline. It's like when you have a 44-year-old kicker, at some point you have to get a kicker. If he comes back, this is not a need. But if he doesn't, then who knows? That's why I'm up in the air on the Falcons with their kicker situation. You know, Ryan? Because they're kickers in their 40s. I'm not sure if he's going to retire, but at the same time, I think it is a little bit concerning. Receiver, I feel like that's the biggest need for the Panthers now that they don't have Kelvin Benjamin. Tight end, Olsen's getting older, but Ed Dixon is playing really well this year. I'm actually going to move this team need down so as not the primary need. So secondary is going to be the second big need for this team, and then guard depth, edge depth, tight end depth, and quarterback depth behind Cam Newton would probably be my bigger needs. So the Carolina Falcons have like 6 different needs, and the Panthers have like 8 different needs. So the Saints here, I'm going to replace linebacker with D-line because the Saints, Alex Anzalone, they've got great linebackers in their system. They're tight. They just need one more edge player next to Jordan. They need a successor to Breeze. They could use one more tight end next to Fleener, even though he's played fantastic. And then, you know what? We're going to replace this tight end with a wide receiver because Willie Snead's just been too much of a liability this year. And if you put a guy like Sutton or Lazard with Michael Thomas, who's a veteran, they would thrive with Breeze in that situation. So we're going to get rid of the tight end. We're going to put a receiver as the need, and we'll make you happy there, Ryan. So I know that will make you very happy because I'm acknowledging that, taking ownership.
It really does.
You're impressed that I'm actually taking ownership on some of the things I got wrong. You didn't expect
I'm
me.
actually quite surprised.
All right, moving on to Tampa Bay. The Saints actually have the fewest team needs of any team right now at 4. We added fullback as an extra need. So Saints, really amazing how the Saints have the fewest needs so far. Maybe the Saints win another Super Bowl. Too early to go that far. But the Buccaneers, I would say offensive tackle and edge are the two big needs. Like a pass rusher, they need another pass rusher. This team needs another offensive tackle. They need a cornerback. Those are the 3 big needs. They cut their 4th-round pick, Jeremy McNichols, so I'd say that's the next biggest need. Guard depth is definitely something they could look into improving. They've got great tight ends, great receivers. I'm just not sure what that final team need should be because I feel like this team is set at a lot of different positions. Maybe a safety for depth or a linebacker for depth. Why don't you pick a position outside of cornerback, running back, offensive tackle, guard, or pass rusher for the Buccaneers? Can even be a backup to Winston. Go ahead, pick a position. Wait, kicker. That's it, because they cut Aguayo. Kicker, that's it. Or were you going to suggest something else for Tampa? Go ahead.
They have been known to draft kickers early, so I do like that, Chris. I'm going to say, let's go with offensive guard.
We already have offensive guard listed and offensive tackle.
Okay. I will say let's do safety.
All right, because they did get P.J. Ward from your team, the Broncos, and they drafted Justin Evans too. But Evans looked terrible in coverage. Like, you know what? I'll listen to you and put the safety position. We can add the kicker position too. So we'll add kicker and safety to make it look like they have a lot of needs. This Tampa Bay team has been the biggest disappointment in the NFL so far this year. Because this was a team we all expected to take those huge strides, and they didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, with the Cardinals, I listed QB, wide receiver, and cornerback as those big 3 needs. I even listed running back depth as a big need for this team. Tight end I listed as a need. I think the Cardinals are set on the offensive line because they drafted Dorian Johnson and Will Holden. I think that is why offensive line's not really a huge need for them. I think they could use a center, but I don't think it's a huge priority. Like, they could use another center, but we'll list running back depth anyway. We'll list the tight end. They need a few starters. They've got 4 picks in the first 3 rounds, so they need to find their starters with those picks and then build for the future by getting some critical depth pieces on day 3. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Oh, no, that's about right.
All right, the Rams, we got cornerback, offensive tackle, center listed for the Rams. I had linebacker as a need, but they extended their starting linebacker, so we're going to get rid of that. D-line, I thought Aaron Donald would struggle in the 34. We're going to get rid of that. Connor Barwin's in a contract year. They could release Robert Quinn. I'm going to keep edge up for now. And then receiver, depends on what they do with Watkins. But the receivers with Goff are clicking so far. If they bring back Watkins, that's probably not a need for them. But I'm just looking at different scenarios trying to figure out what the Rams will do because this is a team that's capable of big things in the future. If they rebuild correctly, they rebuild this O-line correctly.
I agree.
You know what? We'll add guard as one more need. I feel like the Rams could use one more guard for depth purposes. So we'll add guard in as a need. And then we'll move on to San Francisco here. We have quarterback, running back, and receiver listed as the 3 big needs. Then we got cornerback, we got center, we got a pass rusher with Aaron Lynch and Elvis Dumerville in contract years. So one more edge rusher with Solomon Thomas. I'm debating what the final spot should be for the 49ers team needs. Should we get them another linebacker for depth with Reuben Foster and Malcolm Smith, who's on IR again, or should we give them or an offensive lineman? What do you think? An offensive lineman for depth or a linebacker for depth?
Linebacker.
All right, linebacker for depth. You're the boss. We'll do that. Seattle Seahawks. Offensive tackle, I listed that as their biggest need. I don't think that's a big need for them anymore. With Dwan Brown, they drafted that other guy out of Texas A&M. I don't think that's a big need for Seattle. Tight end, they might lose Jimmy Graham to free agency. That's a need. Guard, Mark Lewinsky's actually played pretty well at left guard this year, but I'll keep that in there. Running back, Eddie Lacy's a free agent. They need to figure that out and upgrade that position. Receiver, I thought Paul Richardson would be a bust, but he has been huge for Seattle this year. They've got Lockett as well. They've got Baldwin. That's not a need. Cornerback, they could use someone next to Sherman on the Legion of Boom. Justin Britt has successfully made the transition from guard to center. I didn't think he would. Blair Walsh has been phenomenal at kicker too. And then quarterback play. I have backup to Russell Wilson listed as a team need, but Russell Wilson is one of the most durable quarterbacks in the NFL. So tight end, guard, running back, and center are my team needs for Seattle. Go ahead, Ryan. You have the floor to pick the final team need for the Seattle Seahawks, and then we're going to wrap this up.
I'm going to go ahead and I will say receiver.
Awesome. Fantastic work. That was Ryan Romero. That is our NFL midseason report. You saw us adjust the boards on our YouTube special, and we're going to stop the broadcast now. I'll save the board really quickly, but we're going to stop the broadcast on YouTube and TalkShoe. This was a very exhilarating, very exhausting show, but we got through it. The amazing thing is we started this thing at 3, and we got through it in an hour and a half, which is just amazing. I mean, that really is amazing when you consider it. Anything you want to say from the utopia of sports before we sign off and get to the tight end rankings for Sunday's show?
I mean, really, I'm just excited for basketball season. I hope everybody is paying attention to Giannis.
Yeah, I'm working on the updated tight end rankings as well as the MLS draft game. So by Sunday, we'll have 3 draft games up for football, hockey, and soccer. I want to get the NBA draft game started, but I can't until college basketball kicks off. So you're going to have to keep me updated on college basketball when it starts so we can get that up. So, yeah, thank you for joining me, though. This was an awesome show, and tight end rankings will be up on Sunday. So long from the utopia of sports.
Did it do it?